Morning, Ed. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for coming on. I'm excited to get into this discussion and talking about your company and your expertise as they relate to active shooter defense and preparing for those types of unfortunate situations. But before we get into that, can you briefly walk us through kind of like your background and what led you to get into like teaching active shooter response?
Sure, I grew up in this house that I'm now in that my father built in a small city in Arkansas, Whitehall, Arkansas. It's about 30 miles south of Little Rock. Graduated high school, went to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point for 4 years, which gave me a commission as a second lieutenant in the Army, specifically as an armor officer. So then I spent a little over 20 years in the Army, one tour in Germany, the rest in the United States, except for one quick trip to Iraq. And the thing with active shooters actually started as I was getting out of the military because I attended two briefings, unclassified, in which we were shown, everybody in the briefing was shown uh, websites, pamphlets, videos out there on the internet that uh, leaders in the radical Islam movement were trying to urge sympathetic people in the United States to shoot what they called soft targets, military targets, meaning soldiers
Mm-hmm.
off base pumping gas, soldiers at a store, ROTC departments at colleges, recruiting stations and stuff. So that's when
Yeah,
when the Army started telling me that not only me but other people were at heightened risk. That got me a little interested in it, and at the same time, the Army was telling
sure.
everybody you cannot protect yourselves, you cannot carry a gun on post. In my last two assignments, I requested an exception to policy to carry a gun because of the heightened risk that they were telling me that me and my soldiers was at. And of course, they said no. And my last job in the Army, I commanded a battalion where we traveled around the eastern United States training uh, the National Guard that was getting called up for Iraq. This was '04 to '07, so
Mm-hmm.
in the heat of that time. We were traveling in government marked vehicles in uniform, staying in hotels. So, of course, that was an issue. In 10 days, of course, now that's 20 years as an armor officer. So, day to day, normal talk, work, discussion, planning in the Army in that job is how to do, how we're going to plan to do deadly, ruthless, vicious violence to other humans, fully expecting them to be trying to do the same thing to us. That's just what
Right.
the Army does. Well, 10 days after I retired in August 107 from the Army, I immediately began teaching high school at a very good public high school in Kentucky. And so I left a profession where planning to do and accept violence was just a normal daily thing into a
Mm-hmm.
profession where we don't talk about it at all. We never want to talk about it, much less think about it, and we sure as heck aren't going to plan for violence. That's
Mm-hmm.
just not heard of. So, in the and I got hired like 10 days before school started. I got hired at the last minute because somebody had quit. So there I am in the first couple of days of that high school where the teachers have to be there before the kids show up. And we're getting all the policies and plans and reminders. And I get told, along with everybody else in that room, all the other staff members, okay, our active shooter plan. If an active shooter shows up, we're going to announce it on the intercom. And your job as the teacher, the authority figure, the adult, is to gather all your kids in your classroom and pack them in the corner of your room as tight as you can and keep them calm. And they didn't say this, but it was, and wait to see who gets to you first, the cops or the active shooter. Just sit in your classroom and wait to see if the active shooter comes and shoots you. And I thought this
Right.
was the craziest thing I'd ever heard. Of course, I didn't speak up immediately because I'm the new teacher. I'm the brand new snot-nosed rookie. And these people had been in education for decades. They had master's degrees, PhDs. So what happened was, the reason I got into studying this was I figured they must know, there must be something about this active shooter problem that they know that I don't understand. And that happens a lot in my life. So that's why I began looking into it, reviewing past attacks, trying to understand it more to find out why they thought staying in my room and bunching my kids up, which is the exact opposite of my military experience. The dumbest private in the Army will tell you if you get shot at to spread out. You don't bunch
Yeah.
up
React
together.
to contact.
It makes the person who's trying to shoot all of you, it makes their job easier. That's just
Right.
very simple, low level stuff. And I thought, other than pulling my own pistol and shooting my own students for the active shooter, I can't have made his job any easier than by bunching them up in the corner of the room. But of course, it didn't
Mm-hmm.
take long till I found out that they didn't understand anything that I they didn't understand something I didn't. In fact, they understood very little about it. They just kind of understood
Mm-hmm.
bumper sticker slogans and what they had been told by experts and government officials. So
Right.
eventually I went and I asked to talk to the assistant principal in charge of security, who's a very cool dude, very nice guy. Played basketball with him after school. And I said, hey, man, I'm on the first floor. My classroom's on the first floor. I have a big 4-foot by 4-foot window that opens up. You can see the post office from my classroom. I have 11th graders. And if we get told there's an active shooter in this building that I'm in and my students are in, instead of sitting there and waiting for him to come shoot us, why don't we get everybody out the window and tell them to run the post office? You know, baby rabbits know to run away from somebody shooting at them. They don't go to rabbit school to learn that. It's wired in them. And it's wired into us too. If we just won't listen to crazy rules that say you have to stay in the building until you're killed. And
right.
Very, very seriously, he looked at me and said, no, Ed, we cannot have a policy or encourage our kids to run. It'll take hours to get accountability of them. If that happens,
my gosh.
they'd be everywhere. And these weren't stupid people. These weren't bad people. These were very good, educated people that cared about their kids. They just had no experience at violence. You know, it's like me when my car won't start. You know, I'm a man, so I'm going to pop the hood and look at it. That's what you got to do. But I have no idea what's going on under there. I got to take it. I got no idea. So you don't want me planning your car maintenance or your car repair because I have no idea how to do that. And so I said, well, if you're going to say we can't leave the room, which that's what I would have done, but if the policy is we can't leave the room, then instead of huddling in the corners, why don't I get on one side of the door and 2 of my 11th grade football players get on the other side of the door and we have a little welcoming party for him when he comes in, instead of standing off back in the corner where we're just so easy to shoot when if the active shooter comes in. Why don't we have a welcoming party for him with me and a couple of bigger guys? And I got told, no, Mr. Monk, we can't have a policy that we fight the active shooter because our insurance will go up. So school leaders understand accountability because every day the active shooter doesn't show up, that's one of the most extremely important things there is. And they understand budgeting, which is part of that is insurance rates, because that's extremely important. Every day the active shooter doesn't show up. So their plan was based on all the days the active shooter doesn't show up, not the day that he does show up. Now, he's not going to show up 99.99999% of days. So any policy you have has a 99.9999% success rate. But they were looking at what schools want are policies that are easy to type, easy to understand, easy to drill, and aren't controversial. They don't get parents calling, news agencies calling, social media exploding, and they don't want to require things that trigger anybody. Well, turning on a light switch, locking a doorknob, and walking over to the corner of the room are very casual, non-controversial tasks. And they work very well during drills when the active shooter's not there. But they get you killed the day he shows up. And so that's what eventually got me into this, talking to the school leaders of the school I was teaching in. And then that led to other schools, and eventually led to churches, and eventually led to law enforcement agencies. And that was about 17 years ago. And then about 14, 15 years ago, which was also when I was, on my training wheels starting out as a firearms instructor, I started introducing the active shooter stuff specifically for fighting the active shooter, which is vastly different than the mugger, which is why most citizens carry a gun outside the home. So that's why I got into it, and started doing training on it about 14 years ago, both classroom to help people understand the problem, how we failed, why we failed, what we have to change to make it better, and then also sometimes how to use a handgun, how to train, mentally prepare, gear prepare for the active shooter. And that was off and on until Uvalde. I don't know why it was that one, but the Uvalde attack, Robb Elementary in Texas, that from that point on, my phone rang constantly, emails, texts, and I've been pretty darn busy talking mostly to schools, churches, and businesses, and then conferences for schools, churches, and businesses.
Wow.
I think I just did my latest update, and in the next 4.5 months, I'll be in 11 states.
Wow. That's impressive. Now, when you do that, like the training or consulting for churches, businesses, or schools, what does that consist of? Is it you helping them develop a plan that they put in their binder of responses, be it fire, obviously they have their fire, their chemical spill, and then like somewhere in there is the active shooter response. Is it you helping them develop that plan? Is it doing force on force? Like, can you walk us through what that is? These devices reset your trigger after each shot so that you can dry fire just like you live fire in semi-auto. Plus, the Blackbeard fires a laser out of the bore so that you can track your shots and work on height over bore offset for close engagements. And the Blackbeard X uses an accelerometer to track and analyze the motion of your gun on their Mantis X app. Even the United States Marine Corps saw the training value in the Blackbeard X and began to utilize these devices in basic training. So now Marine Corps marksmanship coaches can analyze recruit shooting performance using the Blackbeard in order to make them better shooters. So stop wasting time with traditional dry fire, order yourself a Blackbeard or Blackbeard X today and start training to a higher standard.
Sure. So the very basic thing I'll do is I'll show up and I'll give them a presentation called A Study of the Active Shooter and How to Minimize Victims. And I have a general one. So if I'm talking to a general audience, just an audience of anybody can show up, then I have a general presentation. So it'll cover attacks at schools, churches, businesses, government offices, outdoor locations, just to kind of give a flavor of everything. But it's going to start with the problem of math and time and math, because everything about active shooter problem is time and math if you want to lower, reduce, minimize the victim count. And it will always end with, so given the horror that I've just covered, what's the best plan? So we'll cover planning as an organization, meaning a church, a school, a business, and planning as an individual. So if I'm a school teacher in a school, I have to plan to be a part of that organization. But I might, although I'm a teacher during 5 days a week, I might be at the mall on Saturday. I might be at my church on Sunday. I might be at the movie theater on Tuesday night. So I have to have an individual plan regardless. Now, if I'm talking to a school, so the presentation of understanding the problem, how we failed, and what we can do to not fail as bad in the future, I call that stage 1. That's understanding the problem in the fight. And then for schools, I have a stage 2 and 3, and I can explain to them how to do it, and that their leaders can run them through it if they want to, or I can stay and walk them through it. I went up and did a school in Iowa, I guess January, February, and I did the presentation. Now I'm going to go back and do the walkthrough. So, or the step 2 and 3. So step 2 is we get everybody in the school. So everybody in high school or everybody in middle school or, in that school level. And we project a floor plan of the school up on the wall as big as we can. And we start with where it's most likely to occur, the start of the attack. So in a high school, the most likely location for it starts the cafeteria. So I would point to the cafeteria and say, the cafeteria, 10 minutes before first bell, he starts shooting his fellow students, because that's who it is, in the cafeteria. And now look, cafeteria workers, what is your least bad option? You have 3 options: fight, flee, barricade, which we cover in the first initial stage, right? And they're all bad. So you're going to have 3 options when this starts, and they're all going to be very, very bad. Your duty is to quickly choose for you what's the least bad, and you run with it. And you can run with it because you've already resourced it, rehearsed it, war gamed it, thought it out, planned it out, everything. And then, teacher whose classroom is just outside the cafeteria, what is your least bad option if it starts in the cafeteria 10 minutes before first bell? Teacher on the second floor on the complete opposite side of the building of the cafeteria, what's your least bad option? So the whole purpose of this is that they understand, first, they make a decision on what to do. They don't do the same thing like the lockdown drill. Everybody locks down regardless of where the shooter is. That's absolutely absurd. And they understand kind of how to make that decision. And one of the biggest ones is, where are you in relation to the shooter? It makes no sense that a person that's getting shot at by the shooter, that their option is the same as someone who's on the opposite side of the building of the shooter. They should do different things. Right. Another one is, what are your abilities? Because what I tell them is, fight is the first choice everybody should consider. Now, everybody's not capable, but that's the first one everybody should consider. So are you physically and mentally capable of doing deadly, ruthless, vicious violence against another human? If you are, and you're willing to, then that's what you do. If you don't, then your only other choice is to run away. So it's a very easy decision to make under stress. Go towards him and hurt him really bad, really quickly, or get away from him. But so what are your abilities? If you're not going to fight, what are your abilities to flee? What can you run? Can you run upstairs, downstairs? Can you jump out of a window? Can you jump out of a second story window? What are your what's available to you. If you're going to fight him, what's available to you to use as a weapon to fight him with? Now, you may use none. You may just tackle him, which has happened most of the times when a non-armed person does it. But look around. People who aren't trained in violence are not used to looking around and seeing, a podium stand as a weapon, or a chair as a weapon, or a fire extinguisher as a weapon. They're not used to seeing them with those possibilities. So we talk to them about that.
Sure.
And we talk to them about, if you think at all fighting is what anybody. So, okay, a teacher may not be willing to do it, but if they teach 11th, 12th, 10th graders, and they got football players, they got big guys in there. If they're willing to do it, it's hard to beat a baseball bat. So bring in the most optimal weapon that you're allowed to have there. You say a baseball bat, that's a weapon. We're not allowed to have weapons at school. No, it's not a weapon. It's a sports memorabilia. So go pay $10 at a yard sale for some old wooden baseball bat, scribble on it with a black Sharpie, and say, that's Homer Winkelstein, AAA in 1958, had the most home runs. I bought this. He autographed it back then. And so it's a sports memorabilia on every other day, but it can be used as a weapon on the day of the attack. So that's and
dual purpose. Yeah.
Your classroom may be in one location, but you may be monitoring the cafeteria during one of the lunch periods when this happens. You may be in the office making photocopies when this happens. You may be walking down the hall to the restroom during your break period when this happens. So it's not just where you work and where you are most of the time. It's to get in their minds. That's step 2, is to get in their minds. Okay, I make a decision when it starts, when I know it starts, on which of the 3, fight, flee, barricade, is the least bad for me, and I execute it. And we have to tell students to do that, because sometimes students aren't supervised. When I covered Sandy Hook, the first classroom that shooter went into, he shot the 2 adults first. And then after he shot a few kids, his gun went empty, so he had to do a reload. So that left 11 kids in there that had not yet been shot, that had no supervision, because the only adults in the room had already been killed, and they ran out of the room because they had what was wired into them since birth of run away from some evil guy trying to kill you, and they did that, and they lived. You could be, if you've ever seen the Uvalde security camera video, even though they knew the shooter was outside a minute and a half before he came into the building and started shooting, there's a little kid walking around. And as soon as the guy starts shooting his rifle in the hallway, he runs away from the guy with the gun. The kid knew what to do. So you may drop your kid off at, 30 minutes late for school because he had a dentist appointment early that morning. And so they checks in at the office. They tell him to walk down to his classroom when this thing kicks off. Teachers let kids go to the bathroom. They send kids down to the office to make photocopies. So unsupervised kids need to be told, you also need to understand your 3 options, and you may have to make your own. When I talk to schools, I go deeper into planning and training. I go deeper into options. I offer them a 2-page document. It's a Word document, so they can take it and use it. The first page of that document is what I recommend as an active shooter response plan. It's 1 page. That's all you need. This is scary and evil, but it's not complicated. It's mathematically and physically very simple. So 1 page is all they need. They can take that and add to it, put their name on it if they want to. And then the second page is what I recommend to them for an aftermath book, the tabs of how to organize all the stuff that's going to have to happen after the attack is over. I talked to them about building alterations because this whole summer I will be going mostly to school safety conferences and school resource officer state level conferences. And most of those allow vendors in, and that's how they really make their money on these conferences. You have to pay tuition to attend if you're, an SRO or a teacher or something, but they make their real money off selling vendor space. So vendors are all here, and it's not all active shooter, but there's quite a bit of it, and they're all trying to sell products, saying, "Hey, buy our product, and your kids will be safe." And who wouldn't want to write a check for that if they actually thought it would work? And schools desperately want a nonviolent solution to an extremely violent problem, and it doesn't exist. But man, they want it. So when they get sold a bill of goods, when they get told, "Hey, buy this thing, and your kids will be safe," by golly, they'll write that check.
It's the easy button.
Just a few months ago in Nashville. Now, this wasn't an active shooter. It was just a shooting. The guy went in there to kill his girlfriend. And they had just bought $1 million system, artificial intelligence that works through the security cameras, that would identify, as soon as a gun was visible through the cameras, it would identify it and immediately notify the cops. And they thought, man, this makes us safe. So, of course, they paid the $1 million, or more than $1 million. And they installed it. And when that shooting happened, it didn't pick up the gun. Of course, even if it had, it wouldn't have alerted the cops and got them there in time to keep it at a low victim count. But that's the kind of stuff they want. And just
Right.
closer than that, in Killeen, Texas, there was a knifing by a student on other students, and their system was supposed to pick up knives, and it didn't. They desperately want a nonviolent solution. Less than 2 weeks after Uvalde, and again, that's when my phone exploded. Less than 2 weeks after Uvalde, I got a frantic call from a school district, and I went down, and they had called an emergency school board meeting the day after Uvalde, and they were all emotional, and so they voted emergency funds to buy all kinds of crap, and one of the stuff they bought was what they called a super lock. They had done research, and these locks are about the size of a small shoebox, and they mounted on the cross beam on all the exterior doors, the cross beam that runs between the glass panel on the top and the glass panel on the bottom. Yeah. They said nothing can defeat these locks. A nuclear explosion cannot defeat these locks. These are very expensive. They cannot be defeated. And the principal, this was the high school I was at, he was very proud that he had these, and there was no way anybody was going to get in the building. And when I just pointed and suggested, well, number one, you're a high school, you got over 90% chance your shooter's one of your own students. He's already in there. But even if he didn't, you don't think he would just shoot out the glass, like Covenant, like Sandy Hook, like St. Louis Performing Arts.
My mind went to.
Yeah, well, but again, they are not trained in violence. They've had no experience of violence. We bought the lock. That's what we're supposed to do. We bought a lock, flag on the play. You're not allowed to shoot the glass, right? And so they hadn't started it yet, but they had also approved, I forget how many hundreds of thousands of dollars to rip up the 4-foot fence, chain link fence that went around the school campus and put up a 6-foot fence. Of course, that will do no good against the active shooter in a high school because he's already in your building. He's already inside your locked doors.
Gosh.
But that's the stuff. If we buy stuff, we'll all be safe. Better security cameras.
And those things can be force multipliers if you already have the foundational things in place, right? If you already are willing to do violence against violence and you have the fundamental security elements in place, I would imagine those things can be force multipliers, but they're only force multipliers as long as you have the force to begin with. Like when you multiply 0 by something, it's still 0. And so you have to have the force in place for it to actually multiply anything.
Yeah, I tell them, I'm not saying don't lock your doors. I'm saying don't lock your doors and say there we're safe. Lock your doors.
Exactly.
If you do, lock your doors and say this should give us 2 things. It should give us an audible warning that he's here and he started his attack because he's either going to shoot glass or shoot the lock. And then the shooting and the maneuvering to get in once he's done it should delay him somewhere between 5 and 15 seconds. So if we have a welcoming party planned out, that gives us a 10-second head start to get prepared because he's announced he's coming by shooting through the glass or the locks. But I tell them to be very careful about hardening. And that's what they also want to spend money on. Tougher locks, better doors. Well, if you're a middle school or a high school, the odds are way over 90% your shooter is one of your own current students. So hardening the outside of those buildings for the active shooter is probably not going to have any negative effect on the shooter, but it's probably going to have a negative effect on the cops and EMS trying to get into that building.
That's a good point.
Elementary, your attacker is an outsider, so if you're going to harden the outside for the active shooter, I can understand that. But no matter what hardening you do, understand it's a double-edged sword. It works both ways. Anything you do that might actually delay the active shooter might also delay people trying to find him and stop him or delay people trying to get away from him. So I offer schools a very short list of actual things that I think could help them. The 2 big danger areas in my mind where the shooter can get a very high hit rate in a very small amount of time, and so obviously they have hit there, is the cafeteria in the high school and the playground on the elementary. I haven't been to a school yet that has a plan for the cafeteria when they have kids in there in the high school or the playground. So in the cafeteria, the only thing I can think of is to bulletproof the tabletops. And the kids are taught if the shooting starts, they flip the tables on their sides, stay behind them, or maybe try to run behind them to find an exit. And that won't stop the active shooter, but it'll greatly reduce his ability to get hits on new victims until whoever our counterattack is counterattacks and stops him. And then on the playground, the only thing I can think to do is build what I call tactical walls, ballistic walls. They're about 4 foot high, and they're bulletproof, so they can be made cheaply, if not freely, out of railroad ties or the plastic jersey barriers that are used on the highways that are hollow plastic, but once you fill them with water, then now they're heavy and bulletproof.
Sand or something.
Yeah, or haydite or the brick that then the holes are filled in with concrete, and then of course you paint them pretty playground colors, so it's not a ballistic wall, it's a playground wall. And kids are told if popping comes from this direction, we get on the other side of the wall, we hunker down. If the popping comes from this direction, we get on this side of the wall. Again, that won't stop the active shooter, but it'll greatly slow, if not stop, his ability to get hits until our counterattack team comes. Because I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a high school principal and I said, okay, what is your plan if an active shooter shows up? And they say, oh, it's this great thing called a lockdown drill. Oh, really? Yeah. Show me how it works. Well, come on down the hallway. I'll show you how we do it in the classrooms. And I'll say, well, wait a minute. Let's go to your cafeteria, because in a high school, that's the most likely place that's going to start for you. And they say, well, but it works. Let me show you how we do it in the classrooms. Well, I'm not worried about the classrooms. Let's go to your most likely start point and where he can get the highest hit rate. Let's go to your cafeteria. They don't have a plan there because it's too hard. Lockdown's easy. It's easy to type. It's easy to drill. So that's what they like to talk about. And like I was told, stay in your classroom and the boogeyman can't get you. Stay in your classroom. We'll call the professionals, the guys with the badges, and they'll come take care of it. If you stay behind your locked classroom door, the boogeyman can't get you. Well, and many have disproven that, but the most obvious was Parkland. He shot for 90 seconds on the first floor, shot 24 people in 90 seconds. That's a new person hit rate of one new person every 3.75 seconds. 18 of those 24 he shot on the first floor were inside their classrooms behind their locked doors. He just shot through the doors of three of the 10 classrooms. So had he shot into more classrooms, he'd hit more people, but he only shot through 3 classroom doors and got 18 people. And teachers are told still today, you stay behind that door, you make sure that door is locked, and you'll be safe. And that's just not true. And he could have shot through walls because they were drywall, but he chose to only shoot through doors. Now, Uvalde shot through both doors and walls. So if your walls aren't bulletproof and your doors aren't bulletproof, to include any glass in them in the lock, then you're not safe behind your door. When I do my school presentation, I play a video. First, I play a cell phone video taken by a student in classroom 1214. He actually videoed the shooting while he was in the classroom with the bullets coming in the door. And then I play an interview with the teacher in that classroom. And she says, I'm crouched behind my desk, watching my kids getting shot, knowing I could be the next one to take a bullet. And I'm trying to think, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? So under those conditions, she's trying to come up with a plan. She didn't already have a plan.
Wow.
And I don't know why she didn't already have a plan, but I know one possibility, and that's she was told that staying in her room behind the locked door was the plan, and that her and her kids would be safe. So she didn't need to plan beyond staying in her locked classroom. But when bullets are flying in her classroom, hitting her kids, now the plan she's been told will keep her safe didn't keep her safe.
Wow. Well,
so that's what I tell
and you touched on this, but I find it interesting how we hear about fight or flight, and then obviously Grossman adds fight, flight, posture, or submit, but fundamentally fight or flight. That's like the basic instinct that we have to any sort of danger, and I find it interesting that leave it to these administrators and these bureaucrats to basically ignore that and say, no, we don't need to fight or flight. We need to just submit. And that's basically what they're doing when they huddle in a corner is they're choosing to submit immediately. Yeah. Now it's easy. It's an easy check in the box whenever they have to do training. It's an easy check in the box to say that, our school was required to have a response plan and we have a response plan.
Yep.
It's submit.
They want a plan.
It doesn't actually do anything.
Yeah. They want a plan that meets the state's requirements. So they have a plan, and somebody comes down and inspects and looks in tab D of the safety book. There it is, active shooter plan. Did you conduct a drill last month? Yes, you did. You're a success. But they practice something that'll get them killed on the day of the attack. And all the blame doesn't go on the schools. Again, they got no experience with this, but the federal government, probably their state government, 4 or 5 of the major companies come in and tell them you're doing exactly the right thing. You should hunker down, take some evasive measures, lock some doors, turn out some lights, and the professionals will then show up and take care of the problem. And that's what they want to hear because they do not want to have to think about violence, and they darn sure don't want to have to plan violence. But what I tell them is, if you want a low victim count, you, the school, are going to have to stop this guy before the cops or the ambulances ever get on your property. And they don't want to hear that. But the math is pretty darn clear on it. But again, the federal government's been telling them for 40 years, run, hide, fight. And that's what everybody else tells them. They show them a little better way to tie the door shut, but basically hunker down. You know, my school, and a lot of schools, my school, they don't even say where the active shooter is. They just say, you know, intruder alert or active shooter on campus. Where on campus? I need to know that to know which of my three. Well, nobody needs to know that because everybody does the same thing. Regardless of where you are, you lock down wherever you are because that's the easiest thing to type and easiest thing to drill. It only disrupts the school day about 5 to 10 minutes. Very simple. Yep.
Check.
Yep.
So it sounds like a lot of the stages, the stage 1, 2, and 3, a lot of that's based around METTC. Correct me if I'm wrong.
For decades, the firearms self-defense training community has been teaching the dangerous technique of sight-focused aiming. When you are focusing on your sights, you cannot properly identify the threat, or worse, you might shoot a non-threat. But this course will teach you the same aiming techniques used by elite shooters and even tier 1 units. According to a university research study, police officers who mostly focus on the threat during a force-on-force training exercise maintain an accuracy rate of 75% with their handguns, whereas the officers who were predominantly focused on their sights only had 62% accuracy. And the officers who were more likely to focus on their sights shot the suspect when he was holding a cell phone 65% of the time. But the officers who were using target-focused aiming only made this mistake 18% of the time. The skill of target-focused aiming is becoming more and more accepted in the firearms training community. So go ahead and take this 3-day course so you won't be left behind, and make the decision to train to a higher standard.
Yeah, a little bit. And I didn't explain the third step. Step 3 is the walkthrough. So step 1 is we explain the problem, the options, right? Step 2 is we do the floor plan so everyone understands. I choose what if I have kids I'm supervising, what we do based off of certain factors. Step 3 is the walkthrough. And if it's best if we do that at least one complete day after the other so people have a night to think. And so everybody will walk through together, and we'll go not only to classrooms, but we'll go to the front office, the media center, the gym. We'll go everywhere. And when we get to Taylor's classroom or wherever Taylor works, we'll say, okay, for whatever reason, you decide fight is what you have to do. Show me your fight plan. Show us your fight plan. Show us your weapons that you have brought in. If you identify there weren't any in here adequate, tell me who's going to be involved in it. And if you're a middle or a high school, and if you supervise middle or high school kids, I want to hear that the kids are involved in some way. And after you do that, say, okay, stop. Now, for whatever reason, you decide flee is your least bad option. Explain to us your flee plan. Well, out my classroom door to the left is the quickest exit. That's where I'm going. Okay, that's great. But what if that's the direction of the shooter? What's your secondary? What's your other one? Do you have a window? Is it openable? Show me. Open it up. Do you know how to take the screen off? Do you have a tool that you've brought in that sits by the window that its sole purpose is to break the window if it can't open to the point you can get out? Do you have a decorative quilt? Yeah. Do you have the decorative quilt up on the wall that looks really pretty, but its purpose is to put in the window after you bust and rake it so kids don't get as cut up when they leave? If you teach elementary, show me the furniture. Yeah, show me the furniture you have underneath the window that the little kids can get up on to get to the window to get out. You've already thought, resourced, and war gamed this thing. All you have to do is say, we're executing which one of the 3, and you go.
Yeah.
So I get small victories. I live for small victories. So in the walkthrough stage, there were 2 out that stand out. One was a teacher that had taught there for over 20 years. And she had a 6-foot bookshelf that she kept in the back of the classroom. But she said, I realize it works just as good right by the classroom door. Right when you walk in, the bookshelf's right there. And so she said, now I am going to be a certified sexist, and I'm going to put larger male students in that row next to that bookshelf. And if I say we're going to barricade in the room or we're going to get out the window, but we still want to barricade the doors while we're getting out the window, those larger male students know their job is to get up and push that bookshelf in front of the door. So now not only is the shooter not getting in, but we've got 12 additional inches of ballistic protection of a bullet having to travel spine to front through a book. But after it passes through the door, She thought of that all by herself. Once she was told, you have 3 options, optimize each one. And then another was a private school, a young female teacher. On the walkthrough, she had realized she had this piece of driftwood in her home for decoration up on top of some piece of furniture, about 4 foot long, about 3 foot diameter. And she brought that. She goes, that's now, instead of decorating my home, it's decorating my classroom. On every day the active shooter doesn't show up, it's decoration. But her words, she said, on the day of the active shooter, if he sticks his head in my door, I'm going to bust it like a tomato and basically swing this thing like a baseball bat. Once she was told, you figure it out and optimize. Yeah. They get creative once they're told, you figure it out. So as I talk to the schools.
I love that. I love that too when people get empowered, right? Because that's empowering people and not saying, oh, you know what? You're too dumb to do this, or you're too incapable to do this. So just shut up and get in the corner and wait for them to either kill you or the police to arrive to take accountability of who's left standing.
Exactly. Imagine if any school, their fire drill, stay where you are and just wait and see whether the fire or the firemen get to you quicker. Hopefully parents would rush the school board meeting with pitchforks and demand that this craziness, but that's what we've been doing for 40 years, and that's why we failed.
That's a fantastic analogy. I'll be honest, I've never heard that before. That's a great analogy.
We for some reason, either emotional or political or a mix of the two, we refuse to look at the active shooter threat just like any other deadly threat. So I still run into schools that have code words for active shooter drill. Code red. The eagle has landed. They have some code word. And I'm like, why do you have a code word? Well, we don't want to alarm the children. Well, there's a madman in here with a couple of guns trying to kill them. I think they should be alarmed. I know I would be. And I say, burning to death has to be a pretty bad way to go. Do you have a code word for fire drill, or do you just say fire drill?
Yeah.
Well, we just say fire drill. Really?
Well, and the fire alarm itself is probably fairly anxiety-inducing for some people. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't use it, but it's very loud, and I'm sure there are kids that get scared by the fire alarm. But we have no problem whatsoever with doing those drills, however often we do them.
I'm here in Arkansas. Do you have a code for tornado, or you just say tornado drill? Oh, we just say tornado drill. For everything else, we just, we tell kids at a very young age, don't play with matches, right? Stop, drop, and roll if you catch on fire. Don't get in cars with strangers because there's some very horrible risk out there. But for active shooter, we want to use code words. I went up and trained a police department outside of Detroit a couple years ago, and to get everybody in their department, I had to do Tuesday and Thursday for the way their shifts worked. And so I said, what about Wednesday? And they said, I don't know, sightsee. And I said, well, do you want to bring your school system in or offer it? And they did. And so the school system on the Wednesday, the day between the cop training, I gave my school training to them. And before I did, the superintendent got up and said, hey, I'm so sorry we have to do this. This is such a horrible thing. I wish we didn't have to talk about it. If this triggers anybody, you're welcome to walk out and not attend this. I understand. No problem. And I didn't say anything because it's not my – but I'm like, I want to say, hold on there, Sparky. Do you let teachers opt out of fire drills and earthquake drills and tornado drills? The state requires parents to send their kids to your staff, but they can opt out of the training to help save as many of these kids as they can. Can you imagine getting on a commercial airliner and them saying, we're about to go over the procedures in case we have an emergency landing, but if this triggers anybody, you're welcome to step off the plane while we go over these procedures? No. We don't do it for anything else. So it's some combination of emotional and political interference that prevents us from doing what we need to do.
Yeah, maybe those teachers get to opt out if there's an actual active shooter.
Well, that's what I tell them.
An opt-out sign on their door.
Yeah, you can opt out the training, but you're not going to opt out of the active shooter. Your teachers are going to be like that Parkland teacher behind your desk going, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Yep.
Real quick, I pulled a very common military faux pas or former military faux pas and threw out an acronym without accurately giving those who are not familiar its explanation. So I said METTC earlier because I said it sounds like a lot of Ed's analysis that in his stages sound like METTC, and that's a acronym that stands for mission, enemy, terrain, troops, time, and then civilian considerations. And that's just what anytime you plan an operation in the military, that you use that METTC to help plan that. So sorry I threw that out there, and people were like, "What's that even mean?"
And when I first got into this, I would say, yeah, I've got 24 years in the military, but that doesn't really apply to this because they never taught me in the military how to plan to fight an active shooter. But the longer I go and the more I look back on this, it doesn't directly, but how I approach it does.
Yes, the problem-solving process, absolutely.
Yeah, I was giving one presentation at a conference, and I remember this guy coming in a little late, so he missed my introduction. And after it was over, right, he comes up and he said, "Were you in the military?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Were you an officer?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Did you go to the Command and General Staff College?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "I thought so." So he could see in the way I present it. And in most presentations, I will, after I cover my military experience, I'll go into, we should approach the active shooter like combat, because that's exactly what it is. And we should use the
100%.
the 3-step plan the Army, at least when I was in, used if we knew we were going to have to fight somebody or we thought we might have to, a potential enemy. It's a very simple 3-step process. The first step is we study and define the coming fight. We study the enemy, and we study the environment in which we think we will find this enemy and have to fight him. So with the enemy, we look at things like, what are his weapon systems? What are his skill level on the weapon systems he will have and probably use against us? What are his motivations? Why is he doing what he's doing? What are his most likely courses of action? What are the tactics, techniques, and procedures we can expect him to use? What are the strengths that he has that we're going to have a plan to guard against? What are his weaknesses that if we know them, we can exploit them? So that's how you understand an enemy. And we're not doing that. The biggest example to me is the schools. The school shooter is different than the church shooter, is different than the mall shooter. But even within schools, the shooter at the high school, middle school, and elementary are different. And we're wanting to treat everything as a cookie cutter instead of understanding the most likely enemy in that situation and planning for them. And we're not doing that. So once we understand the coming fight, then step 2 is, okay, given what we understand about the fight, what's the best fighting plan for that specific enemy that we just studied in that specific environment? And I don't want a fighting plan. I want the best fighting plan. So if you show me 8 options, I'm going to ask which one of these ends the fighting in the least amount of time with the fewest amount of us people shot, the fewest amount of friendly casualties. That's the one I'm going to pick. That's the measuring stick. So once we have the best fighting plan, then step 3 is the training plan. How do we train our people how to execute that fighting plan that we just developed to defeat that enemy that we now understand? And we're not doing that. We're doing bumper sticker, one size fits all, cookie cutter, hunker down, lock the doors, turn out the lights, hide in your room. Regardless of where the shooter is, what he's doing, it's just madness. And every time we have a high victim count, we wring our hands and go, oh my goodness, another one. What could we possibly do better? And well, it's pretty clear what we could do better. We just don't have the stomach to do it.
Yeah. So, I mean, you made some great points about how each situation is different, one on a broad spectrum in terms of the school versus church versus place of business. And then beyond that, elementary school versus high school. And then the more details be like the geometry, how the school is laid out and just further and further down. But are there any, or is there any general advice that, if you were to draw a Venn diagram where you have a lot of overlap, any general advice that you would like to share with people that they could take away or apply right now?
Well, sure. So the only way, as in the military, if you're going to fight the Iraqis, the Russians, whoever you're going to fight, the only way you're going to predict how they're going to fight you in the future is how they fought in the past, unless there's been some drastic change. So if you look back at active shooters in America as a whole, not in schools, churches, broad, then it's going to be one shooter and it's going to be a male. Usually younger, although we are now seeing more shooters. California's in the last couple of years have had a couple in the 60s and 70s, but it's likely going to be a male, likely going to be younger. They're going to have 2 to 4 guns. They're going to show up with 2 to 4 guns is the norm. One of them is most likely to be a long gun. That's what they'll start with, a rifle or a shotgun. They'll shoot it till it's empty or malfunction. They'll dump that if that happens and go to their second gun if they have it, and that's the pattern they'll follow. Most of them have large amounts of ammunition. Hundreds of rounds is the norm. We've had at least 5 that had 1,000 rounds not in their car on them. And
wow.
Maybe not all, but a large amount of that in preloaded magazines, in tactical vests, or in backpacks. The rare exceptions where they only have 1 gun and 1 magazine for the gun, other than one airport, it's usually been a school. But it's usually going to be multiple guns, hundreds of rounds of ammunition. they're going to try to start their attack in a place where they don't think anybody will fight back. And they don't expect to fight until the cops show up, somewhere between 4 to 12 minutes after they start. Well, they have, that's 4 minutes is more than enough time to get a high enough victim count to get famous. And that's what they're after, is fame. They're not just shooting people to shoot people. They're shooting people to get media coverage to become famous. Well, if you shoot 1 or 2 people, unless they're famous, movie star or something, you're not going to get worldwide fame. But you go anywhere in America, and it could be a little bitty suburb and a Walmart. If you shoot 30 people, tomorrow morning you will be worldwide famous. So that's what they're after. Many of them have said that in either what they did before or after. The good news is we know what stops them. They're not a supernatural being, and we have to try garlic and crucifixes and wooden stakes and silver bullets and try all this stuff. They're human. We know what stops them. Their shooting of innocent people and their attack will stop once somebody gets close enough to them to threaten them with deadly violence. Every single time that happens, they stop their shooting of innocent people. And they won't return to shooting innocent people unless whoever confronted them breaks contact. And then sometimes they will go back to shooting. Uvalde and Columbine would be 2 good examples of that. And
then deal with that first before they can continue their original mission.
Yeah. So the solution is make contact as soon as possible and don't break contact until it's over. And the ugly math is they're going to shoot somebody every few seconds until it's over. And it's very ugly math. And that's what dictates that the intended victims have to stop it if we want a low victim count. In the first minute of his attack, now again, they're going to go to a crowded place. They don't go out in the middle of the desert, in the middle of the forest to do these attacks. They purposely come to a place where there's a bunch of people. So in the first minute of their attack, even though most of them are very low skilled and low knowledge with their guns, if you come to a bunch of people in a crowded place, it's very easy to go from your first victim to your second victim to your third victim to your fourth victim. So in that first minute, when no one's expecting it, when they start, they're going to average a new person shot every 3 to 5 seconds in that first minute. In the second minute, because people are going to start taking evasive measures, running, hiding, etc. In the second minute, if we let him shoot into the second minute, he's going to have a shoot rate of about every 6 to 8 seconds. God forbid, if we let him shoot into the third minute, his shoot rate will be a new person every 10 to 12 seconds, roughly. Now, that's an average. If they're really aggressive, like Dayton, Ohio, or Aurora, Colorado, or Tucson, Arizona, it's going to be a lot worse. If they're slow and lackadaisical, like Columbine or Covenant, it won't be as bad. And their hit rate of new victims will generally decline as time goes, unless they come across a new pocket of unshot people, such as the Parkland shooter shot 24 on the first floor, nobody on the second floor, but then when he got up to the third floor, there's hundreds of people there. So his shoot rate went back up again.
Wow.
Now, those numbers, that's the rate at which he's going to shoot a new person. Bullets are hitting human flesh a lot faster than that, because the active shooter usually shoots his victims multiple times. He shoots his victims multiple times when he first engages them, shoots them more than once. And then later in the attack, as he can't find anybody new and he's walking back and forth, he'll just reshoot people on the ground that he shot before. So I met a survivor of the Sutherland Springs church attack that was shot 11 times. He lived. A guy that did not live was shot 14 times at the San Ysidro McDonald's. Every single child that was shot at Sandy Hook was shot multiple times. And that's why they all died. 6-year-old bodies don't have a lot of blood. You take a small body that doesn't have a lot of blood to start with and put a bunch of holes in them, it's a losing battle to try to keep them alive.
Yeah.
But that's
the guy that was shot 11 times. What was he shot with?
Combination of 5.56 and 9 millimeter. That was Sutherland Springs.
Man.
He shot 3 magazines of AR into the church building from the parking lot, and then walked inside and shot 46 of the 50 people in there. And this guy was shot 3 times through the walls of the church, and then 8 more times after the guy got inside. And inside, he shot both AR and 9 millimeter.
He shot 46 of the 50 people.
Yes.
That is remarkable.
Yes,
that's a remarkable hit ratio.
Yeah, but they all just either got down and tried to crawl up under the pews, which either one, you just walk down the aisle.
Yeah,
I don't have any data that any of those 50 in there aggressively tried to counterattack you. Now, contrast that with an amazing hero, Stephen Williford, lived 3 houses down from that church, and once he was woke up by his daughter, got his rifle, ran down there, when the shooter came out of the building after doing his attack, then Stephen shot him. But he got there too late, just like a responding cop.
Yeah.
Now, counter that with a church in Irvine, California, which it didn't happen during the service. It happened during a potluck lunch immediately after the service. So they're in a room with round tables and chairs to sit down to eat. And a guy starts shooting them with 2 handguns. And the pastor, during a reload, hits the guy over the back of the head with a chair, knocks him to the ground. Everybody piles on him, and they hold him. Now, he got 6 people before that happened, but what would he have done had everybody just crawled up under the tables and hunkered down and waited to be shot? He'd have probably shot nearly everybody in there. And then you take Jack Wilson.
Yeah.
250 people in that church when that active shooter pulled out a pistol grip shotgun and started shooting people, and he only got 2 in less than 2 seconds because Jack Wilson drew his pistol and shot that guy through the head 2.3 seconds after the first shot of the attack. They had a welcoming party.
Yeah,
that's what we have to have. Everybody has to have a welcoming party. So kind of the 3 steps with organizations and with schools is the first step, if their policy is everybody does the same thing, like lockdown drill. The first big inertia bust is to get them out of that and allow everybody to say, you got 3 options. You choose. Don't do the same thing. You choose. And those 3 choices are fight, flee, barricade. The second step is we encourage people to fight. We tell them beforehand, we want you to fight. We encourage anybody who's capable and willing of fighting. Now, everybody's not capable and willing, but those few of you who are, we want you to prep for that. And we praise you for that because your action will help all of us. The few of the people here that are willing to fight, we prep. Tell us how we can help, because you doing so will help. We got to put fight first and stress fight is the first thing we want everybody to consider. And then step 3 is the gun, having guns present. What I tell audiences is the fact the intended victims, have to fight him is not negotiable. Math and time are clear. That is not a debatable topic. What we fight him with is. Now, the gun is by far the most efficient tool. When the cop runs in, if the cop runs in, to the active shooter attack because he's called and he hears the popping and shooting, the cop's got a lot of crap on his belt. He's got but he's going to be running in there with a gun in his hand. He's not going to be running in there with a taser, a baton, pepper spray, handcuffs. He's going to be running in there with the most efficient tool he has. So when I talk to cops, one of the ways I do with them is I'll say, you get called to an active shooter at a school. You race their code 3, you stop, you get out, you can hear the popping and screaming in the building. You going to take your pistol off and leave it in your car before you go in, or are you going to run in with your gun? And they look at me like I'm an idiot. And they say, you'd have to be insane to intentionally go in there and fight that guy without your gun. And I say, well, that's what we're asking school staff to do until you get there, which is 4 to 12 minutes. And what I tell people is waiting 3 minutes in line at McDonald's drive-thru to get your French fries is not a long time. Getting shot at inside of a classroom for 3 minutes is a freaking eternity. Yeah, the kids in classroom 111 at Uvalde were shot at for pretty much 2.5 straight minutes. That'll seem like an eternity. But yet, almost every active shooter attack, if you read a story, and it doesn't matter what the company is, CNN, CBS, Fox, they'll say, and the cops were there in just a few minutes. Well, he shoots a lot of people in just a few minutes, so that's not a good thing.
Yeah, so there's a couple questions I have from all that. The first one is, like, when you start discussing this with schools, and particularly on the gun issue, what has been your experience with the pushback, or if they're receptive to that? And what's your experience with that?
Well, if it's not a school that already has armed staff or is leaning that way, there will be pushback. So I have a slide I call the boogeyman arguments, and I already have it. And I know, because I've been doing this for 15 years, I know what they're going to say. So if they don't well, let me start out first with saying, I tell them the fact that you, the school staff and students, the fact that you have to fight him is not negotiable if you want a low victim. Now, what we fight him with is, so if by law or by choice you're not going to have guns, then show me your fight plan. Show me what you have in here to fight him with. And I intentionally show them a list of active shooters that were stopped by unarmed people. And there's 6 schools where students or staff, or in one case a construction worker, physically stopped the active shooter without a gun. So it can work, and it has worked. And it works because, thank God, they're not Navy SEALs or John Wick or Jason Bourne so far. They're almost always a punk that brought dad's gun, or they stole guns that morning or the day before. They know nothing about them. And so they're evil, but they're not that tough to fight. And so we got to teach them how to fight without a gun. So now, I'm not talking about jiu-jitsu classes. We teach them simple things like, if you watch the videos of these shooters, they typically walk back and forth, which means that they're going to turn their back on you eventually, which is a great time. And his hearing's probably shot because he's been shooting a gun indoors, so you running up to tackle him. And you have the huge advantage of he does not expect anybody to fight him until the cops get there. So if you look at these active shooters, the ones that come to mind are Pulse and Uvalde. They're walking around with just their AR kind of hung down by their side, strolling, because they're not expecting anybody there to fight them. So that'll be quite a surprise. Show them how catching them coming through a doorway, you take away almost all their advantages of being armed, especially with a long gun, because he can't see until he breaks the threshold. That's a great time to hit him in the throat with a baseball bat, hit him in the face with a fire extinguisher, throw hot coffee in his face as he walks through, and then tackle him and get him on the ground. We got to start teaching people what reloads and malfunctions look like. For all the non-gun people out there, they don't understand that if you see this type of motion, then the gun is not working. He's either he's struggling with a reload or he has a malfunction. What a great time to fight or run from an active shooter than when his gun does not work. But if you don't know what a reload malfunction looks like, you can't take advantage of that. And I can give them a list of either people fled or attacked, or in some cases both, when the shooter started messing with his gun with a reload or malfunction. But if they don't know that, and we can do that with a 60-second video. We don't even have to bring guns in and handle actual guns. We can just have videos showing, if you see this type of motion by the guy, that the gun doesn't work.
And now that you mention it, it is amazing how often they have malfunctions, right? These people, I don't know what type of guns they're buying or these Frankenstein builds that they have, but it seems like they have a remarkable number of malfunctions compared to my shooting experience. And it's like
a lot. And I usually show a slide that shows like 10 where they had a malfunction and they couldn't fix it. Which anybody with, again, understand their weaknesses. They are very low skilled, low knowledge on these guns. And a lot of it, I believe, is because a lot of times it's the AR-15. And I'm not a huge AR-15 guy, but I know how to shoot them. I own several. In my experience, they do not like to run dry. Like my Glock pistol, I can blow dry it with a hairdryer, bone dry, put it together, it'll run. But the ARs tend to jam up on the first round, 9th round, 6th round, 11th round, if there's no oil or grease on the bolt assembly. So if Dad cleaned his gun, didn't oil it because he didn't plan on using it, threw it in the safe or threw it in the closet, and the kid steals it and brings it. In one case in the school in Washington, he couldn't make the first round go out. In the Turnberry Towers in Vegas in the last year or so, the first shot, his AR malfunctioned. And then I cover the Aurora Theater. He emptied his shotgun, and then he had an AR as his second gun. It malfunctioned. His attempt to fix it was to take out magazines and put in new magazines. Gun would not fire, and that was his only thing he knew to do was to put in new magazines, which of course never worked. But that's just how low. That's
because it works in the video game, but didn't work in real life apparently.
Maybe that's it. But yeah, a lot of them have malfunctions, and they're not really quick on their reloads, and they're not really quick on their malfunctions. So that goes back to understanding the weaknesses of these guys and using that against them. Absolutely.
And thank God, because I mean the information on how to do that stuff effectively is ubiquitous now, and so it would not take much for one to binge watch, I don't know, YouTube, and learn how to do this very effectively.
On the boogeyman arguments, on the boogeyman arguments, I know what I'm going to get when I go in there because it's the same cookie cutter thing every time. What they're doing is they emotionally or politically don't want to do what math clearly shows us is the best solution. And so they just find faults, and there are faults. So I use the analogy, it's like horrible pain in my abdomen. It's gotten worse every day for 2 weeks. It's now unbearable. I go to the doctor and he says, Ed, you've got appendicitis. That thing's going to bust any minute. Well, what happens if it busts? Well, you're probably going to die. I mean, we'll do our best, but you're probably going to die. Well, that's not good. Have we got any options? Oh yeah. Let me tell you about it. We're going to knock you out with some really powerful drugs that we don't completely understand how they work, but we're going to knock you out with them. Then I'm going to rip you open. I'm going to fiddle around in there, and I'm going to find that thing. I'm going to cut it, sew you up, and
there's going to be blood everywhere.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, is there any risk involved in that? Oh, mountains of risk. That's why you're going to sign 28 pages of waivers I mean, you could not wake up from the anesthesia. I could cut something wrong and internally bleed. You could get sepsis. Whole list of, well, why would I want to do something that's so risky? Because if we don't, you're going to die. So like John Farnham always says, you're not guaranteed a risk-free life. It's not about finding the option with no risk. It's about finding the option with the least risk. So they can find risk and problems with what I'm suggesting, and there is. But what's the alternative? So they'll say, we don't want guns on campus. No guns on campus. Okay. So you don't have an SRO? Well, no, we've got an SRO. And you don't let her carry her pistol? Well, no, she carries her pistol on campus.
Oh,
so
man.
Guns on campus is not a bad thing. It's just a matter of who has it. You don't want guns
Everyone's
on campus.
pro-gun. Just some people would prefer to outsource that violence to someone else.
So you don't want guns on campus. Absolutely not. So when an active shooter starts and you screaming into 911 to get the cops here, are you going to tell the 911 operator, you tell those cops to get here quickly, but don't you tell them not to bring their dang guns. You make sure they don't bring their guns on their campus. Well, no, they're going to scream, please God, come here and do some violence on this guy. So
bring all the guns.
Yeah, they know that guns in good hands is the best solution. Their plan just has it 4 to 12 minutes from the first shot. I'd rather have it 15 seconds from the first shot. So they absolutely know that guns in somebody's hands is not the only solution, but it's the best solution. And they'll say, but these... Yeah.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Well, they'll say, but you're talking about staff here at the school having guns, but they don't have any police training. And I say, well, Sparky, they don't need any police training. Eli Dickin didn't need it. Vic Stacy didn't need it. Pastor David George didn't need it. I give you Humberto Garcia. I give you a whole list of people who never had police or military experience that successfully shot an active shooter without hurting anybody. Because we in the gun world, especially men, I think like to make this a little more complicated than it is. But it's really just lining up two things and pulling a lever. That's all it is. Humans have been killing large mammals with guns for hundreds of years without badges. It's called hunting. That's all this is. This is just a little more spicy because the big mammal has the possibility of shooting back at you. But it doesn't require a badge at all. And then I say, you know who did have over 25 years of police training and experience? The SRO at Parkland that wouldn't go in. So the police experience and badge is irrelevant. What matters is, are you close? Do you have a gun? And will you do something about it?
Yeah.
And they'll say, well, arming teachers is a dumb idea. And arming teachers is a political term like assault weapons, Saturday night special, cop killer bullet. It's meant to bring up bad images. It brings up the image of we go around to every teacher and say, here's your grade book and here's your Glock. Take it. If you're going to be a teacher here, you have to take a Glock. Which is, of course, not. We're not doing anything proactive at all if they go the gun route. They're not going to arm anybody. They're going to stop disarming those few who already carry a gun in public. These staff members are already carrying in the grocery store, the Walmart, the mall, the movie theaters, the dry cleaners, their pharmacy, the oil changing place. They're carrying everywhere else. It's just right now, before they step onto campus, they have to disarm. We're just going to stop making them disarm. They're not causing a problem carrying the gun everywhere else. Why would we think here on campus they would cause a problem?
And I like framing it that way. That's great.
Well, but when the staff member pulls out his gun and shoots the active shooter, the cops will show up, see him, her, the staff member holding a gun, mistakenly think they're the active shooter, and they'll shoot them. That is a possibility, but it's an extremely low possibility because of time and math. If a staff member shoots the guy down in the first minute, preferably the first 30 seconds, you'll be on your second cigarette by the time the first cop shows up. And that's not a bang on cops. That's a bang on the system, that the 911 system that brings the cops to us.
Yes, exactly.
Jeff Wilson shot that guy in his church, and he said, I don't know how long after I shot the guy that someone finally made a 911 call. But he said, I can tell you, once the first 911 call was made, it took the cops 4.5 minutes to knock on the outside door of the church. So that is a risk, but it's a very small risk. So do you want to wait 4, 5, 6 minutes and let the active shooter shoot that many more people because of that small risk? It's just, and I know they're grasping for straws when they start saying things like, oh, the armed teacher will snap and shoot kids. Well, so might the SRO, but you don't let that rare, crazy, wild, hypothetical risk keep you from having SROs. And if you
keep you from letting the teacher have scissors in their room.
Yeah. If you have not only teachers, janitors, if you have anybody on campus that you think has that potential, why in the heck are you employing them?
Yeah.
They need
that's
to
a really, when I heard that, I was like, really? That's your thought? Is you're scared of the teachers shooting the students?
They're grasping for straws, and they'll say, "Well, the students will take the gun away from the teacher." Well, I mean that's possible, but almost every SRO I know carries openly in a uniform, so everybody in the school knows that the cop is wearing a gun. It could have been attempted, but I've never read it, that any school, anywhere, any student tried to take the gun away from the cop that was carrying it, and they knew where the gun was. I had an SRO tell me one time, hey, I'm in pretty good physical shape, but if 4 football players decide they want my gun, I'll put up a good fight for 15, 20, 30 seconds, but they're going to get my gun. Preferably the staff would be carrying concealed. The students wouldn't know who's carrying, if so, where they're carrying it. That's when they start saying the armed teacher will shoot a kid and they'll take the gun away from the armed staff. That's when I know they're really grasping at straws. They're trying to do anything but do what math clearly shows we want them to do. And they'll say, well,
even if I feel like if you could go back in time to any of these situations where this happened, and the situations where we were relying on a police response, and that was the first instance where the shooter encountered a gun. If we could just hypothetically go back in time and give all the teachers that want to be armed guns, just like you were saying, like their normal day, they're normally armed, they're armed here. I can't imagine a sane person saying that they would not take that option if we had that option. But yet, for these future scenarios, it's like, well, I don't know about that. It's like, y'all, it's going to happen again. Statistically speaking, it is going to happen again. And so why not just go ahead and let the people who want to be armed. And, oh, by the way, if you want to give them extra training, they got, however many weeks during the summer that maybe they can integrate with the police or SRO and do some training with them. But it's so ridiculous how they rationalize not allowing capable adults to be armed in a school with children.
Yeah. And so my brother, if anybody out there knows what IDPA is, it's a defensive shooting sport with a handgun. My brother is a master level.
Wow.
He's a master level shooter, has been since he started. He taught high school for 28 years. The last 2 of those years, he became a part-time police officer. So though he was still a teacher wearing civilian clothes, he was wearing a concealed handgun because it was legally allowed, because he was a part-time officer. Then when he retired from teaching, he became a full-time officer and was an SRO at that school for 8 years. His character and his skill with guns was the same before he became a part-time officer, so he could have been offering that protection before he had a badge, which doesn't mean anything other than the legalities of carrying it. The badge is irrelevant. What matters is, are you there? And there's something for having skin in the game. Most people know that the SRO at Parkland heard the gunshots in Building 12, reported that there were gunshots in Building 12, and then didn't go in. In fact, he backed up and he hid for 40 minutes. But most people don't remember or know that the next 7 deputies that showed up didn't get within 50 yards of that building. So that's 8 out of 8 deputies didn't go in, even though at least 5 of them could hear the shooting in the building. They had no skin in the game. If their daughter was in that building, I bet they'd have run in there. So having members of the church, faculty of the school, they've got skin in the game. So maybe a little more likely to act.
Yeah, it's a great point. Real quick, you mind if we take a break?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll check on my kids too. Our kids are all homeschooled, so I'm the SRO for today at the school. I actually did. I say that jokingly, but I don't know if you know this, but I was an SRO before. Oh, camera's not focusing. There. Hold on. There we go. I was an SRO before leaving my department that I worked with, and we might get into that. I've talked about it in another episode, reasons why I left that situation, but a lot of the reasons were kind of those similar objections that you have with like insurance and accountability and budgetary things where they were prioritizing the budget over school safety. But nonetheless, so I left and we started homeschooling our kids. And then we also have them enrolled in a homeschool tutorial. It's like on Mondays, basically just like enrichment classes. And that way they also get to, meet and integrate with other kids. And next year I'll be doing security for that
tutorial. So I just thought it was funny that, I left that and now I'm basically doing, and what you said about having skin in the game, right? Like my kids actually go to the school and, it's way different than, I think it is important to have skin in the game in those situations. And I think that when you have someone protecting that building and that community who does, it considers himself part of that community, it definitely makes a big difference.
Well, Pastor David George went to Walmart with his family after he preached his sermon on Sunday, and the active shooter kicked off inside and then ran outside. And the video shows David running out. He hadn't drawn his gun yet because he says, I didn't go out there to stop the active shooter. I went out there to find my family and get out of it. All I wanted to do was keep my family safe. But then when he saw the active shooter shoot his next victim in the parking lot, he's like, crap, I don't know where my family is. They could be hiding right next to him, and they're the next ones he shoots. So reluctantly, he pulled his pistol out and shot the guy. The same thing with Vic Stacy in Texas. He wasn't going to get involved until he saw that the shooter had pinned a policeman down and was probably going to murder the policeman, and reluctantly decided to get involved. So, yeah, skin in the game. Because you can't look at anybody. They don't have, hero tattooed on their forehead. You don't know. You don't know.
And you don't know from incident to incident either. And like be it military or police, you could be a hero in one incident and then be very timid and scared to death in the next. And so you never know like how the individual person's going to react from one to the other. So speaking of having armed people, if the school is going to have someone armed, what are your thoughts on how many people? Is it like one enough? Do you need more? And then where should they be?
You need enough. And what I mean by enough, it depends on the size of the buildings and the campus. So where I am, we have 4 elementaries. They're very small. 2 is adequate. 3 or 4 would be better for more redundancy, but 2 would be adequate. Whenever the kids are on the playground, there's one of them is always on the playground with the kids because that's one of the places they get shot. And then the other one's inside the building somewhere. They're so small, no matter where it kicks off, that one in the building could hear it. Now, my high school is 4 wings of 2 stories each. So you would need 2 on each floor of each wing. And if you and I are on the same floor wing, if we're the 2 on the first floor east wing, we don't have the same lunch period. So that when you're at your lunch period, I'm in the hallway. And there's redundancy there. If I take my kids on a field trip, you're still there. If you have a sick day, I'm still there. What the goal is, no matter where the shooting starts, at least one of our armed staff, preferably 2 for redundancy, but at least one hears and sees it and can get to it quickly. So we don't need a 911 call, a radio call, police travel, and police entry, which eats up time, which gets people shot. So, I tell people, I'm not saying don't have an SRO, but don't have an SRO and say, there, we're safe. Well, I've gone to schools here in Arkansas have been able to have armed staff forever, but really it was after Uvalde, where I think before that there were only like 12 or 13 districts that did it. I started training them. They're like, yeah, we care about our kids. We have armed staff. Oh, really? Where are they? Oh, it's a superintendent. Oh, you mean the guy in that building 8 miles down the road from the actual school campus? Then he's like a responding cop. You're not. And I say, you don't have anybody in the cafeterias or the playgrounds? Oh, no, we don't want guns down in the school buildings. Well, just having a gun somewhere on the property of the school is not going to help you when the active shooter shows up. So even some of the ones that are doing it are not doing it correctly.
Wow. So talking about churches, before we got on the call, I talked to some of my buddies I go to church with about our church security plans and just wanted to get their take on some questions they would like me to ask. And one of those common one that kept coming up is, and this is just what I'm calling it here, is like, the left of bang gray scenarios, right? The shooting hasn't happened. Something suspicious is going on. It's not really sure. It's not right. Someone's actively shooting. That's black and white. It's like, oh, go line your sights up and kill the person and keep pressing the trigger until they stop doing what they're doing. But before they start shooting, maybe the person has a mental issue, or it's a domestic that happens on campus, or just one situation that happened over here was this green pickup pulled up in the parking lot with a Middle Eastern looking male. Something seemed out of place. They go up and talk to him, and he's like, "Oh, I'm lost. I'm trying to find Kroger." And they're like, "Well, Kroger's right down there. It's not far away." And then apparently a very similar thing happened, or not very similar, the exact same thing happened at another church in this area where Middle Eastern male pulled up and said that he was lost, just looked out of place. And I'm, again, for those listening, you listen to this podcast enough to know that I'm not saying he looked out of place because he's Middle Eastern. I'm saying he looked out of place because of all the other indicators that he was giving off. But I believe that's someone with a plausible deniability probing an area. Now, in those situations, it was handled well by security. But to kind of put a bow on this question, what is your advice in those situations before it actually happens for security, and how can they prepare for those to happen? Because honestly, I feel like those are more likely than the actual shooting portion.
But what I tell churches, I don't do church security. Church security is super broad, super deep, and it's full of legal landmines, and I'm nowhere qualified to talk about it. I deal with a very narrow slither within that of the active shooter, which is the least likely to happen, but the most catastrophic.
Okay.
But it's also the most black and white. So when I talk to churches, I say, just like I'm not telling schools don't have an SRO, but don't have an SRO and say there we're safe. Churches, I think the biggest reason to have an off-duty cop there is if you have to put the habeas corpus on somebody. If you have to lay hands on somebody because of a numerous number of reasons that have happened in churches, then in most states cops have immunity. Whereas if Ed Monk, the volunteer at the church, lays hands on him, then Ed Monk's probably looking at a lawsuit, and the church is probably looking at a lawsuit. So if you've got to lay hands on somebody for any reason, having an off-duty cop there is big. But if you can identify anything that don't look right, then just having one or more members of your team, depending on how thick you are, just shadow the guy. Walk around with him, very polite. And from my understanding, talking with churches, most of the time it leads to nothing. They leave after the service, everybody's happy, but if something does happen, you have something there.
Yeah, having an off-duty cop, that was my advice, because if you have to detain someone or use some sort of less lethal, you want the cop to do that. Just one, from a liability, and he's going to have far more tools on hand to do that with. You don't want to be detaining someone who's having a mental breakdown until police arrive. There's just, oh my gosh, that would be a nightmare legally, or could be a nightmare legally. But I mean, I agree. I think churches are probably one of the most difficult in terms of nuance and things looking like one thing, but really being another situations to address from a security perspective. Because you could have a person who maybe they, like the night before, they were willing to kill themselves, and they literally have a come to Jesus moment, and then they feel like they need to go up to the altar and like talk to the pastor. That could look the same as someone going up to the altar to shoot the pastor in the head. I mean, those situations could be identical. What
do most churches say? Most churches say, have you hit rock bottom? Are you at the worst point you've ever been in your life? Do you have nowhere else to turn, brother? Well, come. That's why we're here. Come in. So they actively recruit people that are having all kinds of issues. And of course, not the majority, but a small percentage of that is going to turn into trouble. The three biggest things I tell churches is it's about half or more of active shooter attacks start in the parking lot. So stupidity is a weakness. So for the half of them that are stupid enough to start in the parking lot because they can't get a high hit rate out there and they're easily engaged out there. For those half that are dumb enough to start their shooting in the parking lot, we need to stop them out there. So churches that are serious about the active shooter must have people, not just cameras, people in the parking lot, a welcoming party ready to engage. The half that get into the building before they expose their guns, we're still going to have to stop them. It's just more complex and more dangerous for everybody to do it. We still have to do it. But for those that start outside, let's do the low-hanging fruit and do that out there. If we stop him in the parking lot, our chances of a low victim count are really, really high. And so far, an active shooter at a church has not been a member or a regular attender. There have been shootings by members and regular attenders where they go in and shoot the pastor, shoot their ex-wife, but not a mass shooting. And then the church having armed members there as a welcoming party has worked 100% of the time, which is pretty astounding. It's only twice, but it's 2 out of twice. It's worked every time it's been challenged. So we ought to take a look at that. And that would be Jack Wilson and Gina Som, the New Life Church in Colorado and the West Freeway Church in Texas.
Okay.
And then if you count having off-duty cops there as a welcoming party, that worked in Lakewood in Houston. a little over a year ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did a video on that one. It was pretty crazy. Sad that the kid got shot.
Yep. And so there again, we get into, there were at least 5 paid cops there at that mega church. When the shooting started, 4 of the cops hid. 1, thank God, did his job, walked down there, found the active shooter, and killed her. But 4 of the 5 cops hid, while the 1 cop did the gunfight for about 2 minutes and ended it. But skin in the game. Skin in the game is important.
I agree. So, where can people train with you? Like, how does it work? Do you have classes throughout the year? Do you travel to the location, like a church or a school or whatever? How does that work?
Yeah, most of my presentations are on the road. So I'll be in, I think the count was 11 states in 4.5 months, because the summer is when all the school conferences are, and all the state SRO conferences. They do them when the kids are out of school, obviously. You can contact me in my Facebook. We don't have a website yet. I'm probably going to have one for my book here in a week or 2 when it comes out. So I'm going to probably also have one for my training. They can look at Ed Monk's Facebook page, or they can look at Last Resort Firearm Training's Facebook page and contact me there. Or my email is
book?
First 30 Seconds is the title of it. Is it
30 or spelled out 30?
The word first, the number 30, and then the word seconds. Because if we want a high expectation of a low victim count, he has to be stopped in the first 30 seconds of the attack. That's basically the gist of the whole book. But my email is my name.
And your email?
EDMONK, Ed Monk, no dot, no space, edmonk@AOL.com. Yeah, I still use AOL. But
you've got mail.
We just talk. My calendar usually fills 6 to 9 months out. I already have a few events in March and April of next year, but usually it starts filling 6 to 9 months out. So if you want me to come do a presentation or a series of presentations, just hit me on Facebook or text me my phone number or email me, and we'll work out what you want. And I'll look at the time, look at my travel cost, and give you a quote. If it's a school, church, or law enforcement, and you're not charging a fee to attend, then it'll be just a little bit over my travel cost.
Yeah, I'll put all that stuff below in the description for anyone who's interested. Email, website, phone number.
I do live fire classes the one day I can do anywhere, because all we need is a typical range set up with a berm and stationary targets. If I go to my 2-day, either my response for the end user or my instructor class, which I do 4 to 5 times a year, then I don't travel much with that unless the place is close enough, 3-4 hours away from me, or they've agreed to buy the 3-dimensional mannequins that I use in my individual scenario. So Friday, I fly up to South Dakota. I'm doing 2 active shooter instructor classes up there for the South Dakota Police in Pierre, and they've agreed to buy a fleet of the targets, so I can fly up there. I don't have to drive all the way up there. But a presentation.
How long is the instructor course?
2 days. I do it at my place, usually 2 to 4 times a year. I did one in April. My next one's in October. It's filled. My next one after that is April of 26. It's got 2 open seats in it. These classes fill really quickly, and people think that's impressive, but I only let 10 people in the class, because once we go to day 2 and individual scenarios, we run 2 bays simultaneously with 2 instructors. I can't put 20 people in there because there'd be too much waiting around day 2. So I've done that as a student, and I don't like it. I don't like waiting 50 minutes to do a 2-minute scenario, then wait around for another 50 minutes. So
it's like being in an IDPA match.
Yeah. Well, exactly. The reason I got into it with the gun instructing was because, again, when I got interested in this, leaving the Army, becoming a teacher, was when I started becoming a gun instructor. And so I was just seeking out any book, any training I could get on the active shooter to learn more about it. And I found, some gun classes, active shooter, and at least the ones I went to, both in and outside of law enforcement, sucked. It just, you showed up in a classroom, they talked about Columbine, they talked about Virginia Tech, a couple of the shootings, and then you went outside and just did a regular gun class. So an active shooter gun class meant we talked about a few attacks, and then we just had a regular gun class. So I said, there's got to be a better way of actually making the training specifically for this threat, the active shooter, not the mugger, not the other threats, not the home invader, but specifically for this one. So that's what I've tried to do.
That's cool. Now the 2-day like instructor course. You said the instructor course is 2 days. What's your typical course length? Like,
well, if 1 day, what I call my active
if
shooter
if it's not the instructor course, if it's just like a basic active shooter course.
Yeah. Well, if you took, then that's active shooter response. The active shooter response 2 day, and I've gone up to 4 days, but usually it's 2 days. And the active shooter instructor look very similar. It's just that we're not going to shoot as much in the instructor class because we're going to spend more time talking about how to set up the targets, why I set them up the way I do, why I progress the class the way I do, lessons I've learned in the past, things that I tried that have failed that I no longer do. So it's basically structured the same, but they're going to get a whole lot more on why I do the way I do it, lessons I've learned, how to set up and run the training, not just be a student and shoot the scenarios. They're going to have the understanding of why.
That's cool.
So that's usually set up. It's 2 days. Usually about half of each day is class and about half of each day is shooting. The first day is all on stationary targets. If the range I'm at has steel, we might do a little reinforcing on steel. And then the whole range of the next day is just individual scenarios. And depending on, we'll usually get 6 to 8. Each person will get 6 to 8 individual scenarios, live fire.
Okay.
Awesome. And we show them how to do it the best way, which is on the 3D targets. But before I found out that, I figured out how to make that work. We did it on photographic targets and IDPA targets with shirts and hats. So we show them all 3 ways, depending on how much money they want to spend or what their range restrictions are. Sure.
Do you have a YouTube channel or anything with like any of your stuff on there?
No, I'm pretty low tech. Again, I'm just I've been doing this 14, 15 years, and I'm just now getting a freaking webpage. And if I didn't have somebody helping me with that, I wouldn't have that. So
I understand that. Well, this has been great. I really appreciate you coming on the show again. And I think you provided tons of great actionable advice that people can take away. And then also, if they're interested in training with you, I'll have those links in the description. But yeah, thanks again, Ed. I appreciate it.
Can I talk about my conference really quick?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Yes. See?
So for the last 10 or 12 years, I've been traveling around the country pretty extensively. And a lot of that is attending conferences on the active shooter. And I've gotten to meet some of the unbelievable heroes that were there, that were brave, that acted and saved a bunch of lives. So there's usually one, maybe occasionally 2 at these conferences. But I thought, why don't we just have the conference just for these guys? So the 4 I knew the best that I'm friends with, I asked them if they would all come to my little hometown of Whitehall, Arkansas, and do this, and they all agreed. So on August 23rd, which is a Saturday, it's about 30 miles south of Little Rock, Jack Wilson, he's the guy who drew his pistol inside of his sanctuary and shot the guy through the head that had pulled a shotgun and shot 2 of his friends in his sanctuary. Officer Greg Stevens he's now retired, but of the Garland, Texas Police Department that was pulling security at a huge event. 2 guys showed up in a car. Both of them got out with body armor and rifles and started shooting at people. And Greg Stevens, 59-year-old cop, drew his pistol, advanced towards them, and shot them both down and killed them both with his pistol, even though they had body armor and rifles. He'll be there.
Wow.
Stephen Williford, we mentioned him at Sutherland Springs, lived 3 houses down from the church that got attacked, got woke up by his daughter, put pants on, did not put shoes on, got his rifle, got ammo, ran out of his house barefooted, loading his rifle, got down there as the shooter came out and shot that guy. And then Pastor David George, again, preached his Sunday sermon, then went to Walmart with his family where an active shooter kicked off, and he shot the guy and killed him in the parking lot of Walmart. All 4 of those guys will have about an hour and 15 minutes to tell their stories. I know Pastor George and Officer Stevens will use PowerPoint. They'll actually show videos, show photos, and they won't just talk about the attack. They'll talk about leading up to it, history of the attacker, aftermath, how did the cops treat them, the prosecutor treat them, media, their family, their church. They'll talk about all of that. So 2 of these happened at a church. One was stopped by a pastor after church. But all 4 of them, I guarantee you, all 4 of these speakers will tell you that God was with them on this day and helped them through this. So they're very normal, very average people, but just did amazing things in a very abnormal situation. So I can't wait for that.
And you said that's August 23rd.
August 23rd. And then some people.
And what location?
Whitehall, Arkansas.
Where is it?
The tickets are selling on Eventbrite. So let me go ahead and tell you this: if you listen to this podcast, if you go to search Eventbrite for Heroes Conference in Whitehall, Arkansas, and I can give you a QR code if you want. If you put in May Hero through the month of May, MAYHERO, all caps, no space, May Hero, it'll save you $50. You'll get a ticket for $99 instead of $149.
And that's all caps?
Yep. And I have
I'll put that in the description too.
Yep. And I've got 2 hotels with special rates for people at the conference. And my brother's running 2 precision rifle classes on the Friday before and the Sunday after, if anybody's into long range precision rifle. Because some people, when I posted it, some people that I knew down in Texas were like, hey, if I'm coming all the way up there, sure would be nice if we had a rifle class to go. So my brother did a rifle class.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yep.
Well, yeah, that sounds like a really cool event.
I've heard each of these guys numerous times, and I will never pass up a chance to hear them again. In July, I'm going to the Faith-Based Security Network Conference in San Antonio. Stephen Williford's going to be there. He speaks 2 days before I am. I made sure I flew down 2 days early so I can hear him again. Because every time they say something a little different, remember something, cover it from a different angle. It is just amazing to hear these men that were there that did it. It's something else.
Yeah, that is. Well, Ed, thanks again. And like I said, this has been a great conversation. I'll have all those links below for how to contact you, how to train with you, as well as the Active Shooter Response Conference, and then that promo code or the discount code. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad we finally made this work out.
I know, right? And guys, thank you so much for watching. And as always, train to a higher standard.